So, because the British were so scared that this war was escalating beyond their control, particularly with French involvement, the British are going to send a guy by the name of Lord North to go and try to broker some form of peace agreement with the French. In particular, he's basically going to repeal much of the legislation, like the Townshend Acts and the Intolerable Acts and those types of things that had initially started the war. But it was just too little, too late. Okay, at this point, the war's been going on for 3 years. We've kind of gotten ourselves broiled into this point where we know that we can't back out. We have to see this to the end. And many Americans thought of this that, okay, so what if we say, okay, we'll go ahead and we'll let this legislation be repealed. We'll quit the war. We just thought that down the road, the British would restart it anyways, or they would start treating us badly again anyways. Um, and so when this attempt at peace, albeit a futile attempt, was denied, Britain is going to rethink its strategy and is going to start sending troops further south. So while they had been focusing most of their effort to the north, now they're going to go through the Caribbean, and eventually they're going to start heading towards Philadelphia, which results in many of the Patriots fleeing the city. When the British get to Philadelphia, however, the French, this is one time when the French do get involved, and we are going to team up with the French, like relink up with the French, and ultimately going to push the British forces all the way back up to New England. Along the way, there are several defeats of the American-French alliance, however, that is going to force Washington to, all right, we need to stop with the offensive, let's sit still, try to use more defense again. Basically, most of this war, Washington's going to launch an offense. It's going to be successful for a little bit. Then it's going to reach a point where he doesn't know how to continue. We're going to get routed, pause, regroup, go back on the defense. And basically, the war is going to go into this massive stall period. The natives, like I said, they are going to kind of help out. At the start of the war, really, the natives are going to play both sides. For in terms of why help the British? Well, because if the British can defeat the colonists, the British had at one point given the natives some land. Remember that land after the 7 Years' War. So, okay, let's defeat the colonists. They're the ones who've been coming into our land. Maybe the British will give us more if we help them out. When that didn't seem to be playing the part that they wanted, then they changed their strategy, said, all right, let's kick out the British, and maybe if we help the colonists, then the colonists will give us what they want. Really, they were just desperate to help somebody out. Plus, when the French joined our side, remember that the natives really were somewhat more amicable with the French, and so therefore, all right, well, we'll help out our formal alliances. Most tribes didn't really want to become super involved in the conflict. The British tended to be more persuasive in terms of getting them to fight on their side, mainly because the British were seen as more powerful. They were winning more battles. So the natives who did choose to get involved figured, all right, I'm going to choose this side. I'm going to get my lands. But this doesn't really work out, obviously, for them. The natives are going to play a significant role when it comes to attacking the southern fronts, while the British are going to focus most of their efforts on the northern fronts. So they're going to kind of divide and conquer. And this is going to force the Americans to retaliate by attacking particularly Iroquois homelands and frontier towns back and forth. And so it does actually make a lot more hostilities between us and the natives. Most of the intense fighting at this point, once the natives are there, once the French are there, the Spanish are there, once there's more people involved than just us versus the British, the most intense fighting in the war is going to occur in the South. Mainly because this is where there were a lot of loyalists still. And also, there were a lot of slaves who left to join the British side because the British were offering them freedom. The British said, if you run away and enlist with our troops and help us to overthrow those people who had enslaved you, then we will grant you freedom. And so at this point, the British, are going to use a strategy of trying to take town by town and then turn it over to the loyalists they could find in these towns to try to maintain control while the British would continue to move forward. This was very successful up until the British lose in Charleston. And so this kind of causes a general, again, like another timeout while the British have to regroup. They didn't anticipate having lost at Charleston. If they had won at Charleston, then the British would have succeeded in dividing the entire colonial effort in half. And this would have made it very difficult for the colonists to have turned around and won the war. So there's a little bit of a spoiler alert. Sorry there. Um, After Charleston, however, they are going to quickly regain a couple more victories, and then General Cornwallis is going to move his base to Yorktown. He's going to just decide, you know what, Carolinas, um, they're kind of falling to the Patriots, so let's move to where we have more of a bit of a stronghold. And so Cornwallis moves his base of operations, and this is obviously going to result in yet another massive battle. It's kind of like a massive game of capture the flag. So at this point, the flag that the Patriots need to capture has shifted to Yorktown. So we have this massive battle that breaks out in Yorktown on October 19th, 1781. And here you have the American forces with Washington again. And we also are joined by the French, here we go, under the leadership of General Jean-Baptiste Danton de Vimeur, Comte de Rochambeau. And they're going to defeat the British. And ultimately, this is going to be basically the nail in the coffin of the British war effort. So on October 19th, 1781, you're going to have the American and French troops line up as this painting shows. American, look at where the French over here, right? And Cornwallis, the second in command, is going to officially surrender to George Washington. Cornwallis himself doesn't sign the surrender. Apparently, he says that he is ill. But this is the moment in which the war is over. We've won! Yay! Go America! Right? Great. Now what? Right? There's a lot more to the revolution. Like I said, I didn't go into detail of every single battles. We're going to do some of these activities in class, so don't fear. But it's more important that you know, a defensive strategy worked better for the Americans. Bringing in various alliances, Lafayette from the French is certainly a huge asset. Bringing them in completely helps to, establish some of the future world relationships, but it also determines our relationship with the natives because they helped the British. So there are a lot of ramifications. But more important than how the war is actually fought is what happens after, right? The question of, great, this colony has broken free, this group of colonies has broken free from the kingdom, this empire where the sun never set. If you haven't heard that phrase, you should have by now. The sun never sets in the British Empire, right? They own so much land that at some point, somewhere in the world, the sun was shining on them. And all of a sudden, they just got a shady spot. That wasn't a very good analogy, but you get the idea, right? And so now you've got this colony. But even more important is, what are we going to do? We declare ourselves to be independent. What does that mean? So now we have to try to establish some form of government. And so what we're going to do is create kind of like I think of it as a Band-Aid government. It's like we're hemorrhaging, toss a Band-Aid on there, it might fix it. And this is going to be the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation was the first written government of the United States. And its whole purpose was to create basically an organization that would allow us to function as an independent nation. We needed to have a government, we needed to have leadership and laws, and we needed to unite as best as we possibly can. Because each colony was so distinct before the war, it would have been really hard to think of ourselves as a collective front. Now we are this collective unit. So what are we going to do? And you've got this lovely little diagram here that shows the Articles of Confederation created this Congress that could raise an army, that could declare war, that could sign treaties. But they could not raise revenue through taxes, and they could not regulate trade and collect tariffs. Who's going to do that? Crickets. You see that silence right there? There was no real solution. So in November 1777, the war's winding down and they're trying to sort stuff out, the Continental Congress formally adopts the Articles of Confederation. And they set up this National Assembly called Congress, where each state was allowed, each colony, which is now a state, is going to have one vote and one representative and each state could determine how they pick their representative. So each state, like if Ohio was like, we're going to draw a name out of a hat, all right, then that's how Ohio. I mean, we weren't there, but you get the idea, you know. And then if Pennsylvania decided that all dudes named Phil were going to write in a vote, then that's how they voted. You get the idea. So each state legislature chose one representative, and that representative could serve no more than 3 years out of 6. So if it was a 6-year term, then they could go a total of 3 years. Basically, you get to pick your schedule. It was a really strange setup. We don't use that very well. And then every year, the Articles of Confederation Congress would pick a president to oversee that Congress, who's going to be like a speaker, if you want to think of it that way. And he would only serve 1 year out of 3. It was such a strange thing. All issues would be decided by a simple majority vote, except for major issues, which required 9 votes. What makes something a major issue and not? Yep. You can already see where there's going to be flaws with this system. It's a very strange system. So Congress had authority when it came to foreign affairs, war and peace, and the army. They could raise loans, issue bills of credit, establish coinage. So good, at least we can have some form of banking. We just can't create the trade, right? We can regulate trade with the natives. Whenever states would have some sort of a quarrel, the Articles of Confederation could be the arbitrator in that. It also established a national postal system as well as a unit of weights and measures. And this is very reminiscent of, Napoleon's going to do similarly with France around the same time, a couple years later. So, 12 state legislatures are going to vote for the Articles of Confederation. So they write up this whole idea of how this is going to function. 12 states are like, yeah, sounds good to us. Maryland was very hesitant, mainly because they were scared. They wanted more land. That was Maryland's whole thing. They're like, okay, we don't care about so much of this, just give us some land. Which is kind of a prelude to a lot of the squabbles that are going to come up, for the next 100 years, where each state's going to say, I want more land, I want more land. Ooh, and then how do these states become territories for states and stuff? These are setting the foundations for those types of arguments. So Maryland demanded that 8 states with Western claims cede the land to Congress for the good of the whole, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, so that they could get some of that. The states refused to do that, but Virginia basically said, all right, Maryland, if you ratify the Articles, we'll give you some land. So Virginia really kind of took one for the team. So good job, Virginia. As a result, the Articles are going to officially take effect and be the law of the country in March of 1781. In order to pay for the Revolutionary War, we had borrowed $9 million from particularly France, but also Spain. And so we're going to have to pay back that debt. And so one of the first things that the Articles of Confederation is going to try to do is figure out how do we pay back this massive war debt. And their genius solution is print off more money. What does this do? Ladies and gentlemen, what does it do when you print off more money? Ding, 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 causes inflation, right? Things have more value when they're rare. So if you suddenly have this huge influx of money, it's not rare, so it's not valuable. It also is going to ask the states to raise their own taxes because, again, the Congress itself didn't have the ability to do so. And the states are going to refuse. They're like, no, just keep printing more. We're good. We don't feel like paying for it. So the states weren't willing to man up in this regard. This dude here is Robert Morris. He is going to become the Secretary of Finance in May of 1781. And he's going to be one of the first guys to persuade Congress to create what's called a Bank of North America. In order to try to deal with the crisis. And he got $30 million donated to create this bank from Holland and France. So he just put us $30 million more in debt in order to try to pay back the initial debt. But hey, our first Bank of North America was created, so good job, Robert Morris.